Then let's begin with the word of prayer. Father, in our lives there are many who claim authority over us. Politics, social, but in all things, Father, you are the authority over us and our lives. Help us always to remember that and to live according to what you wish for us to do. This we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Jesus has come back from Herod and is going to be on his second trial before Pilate. And here are the Gospels for the day. Pick your poison.
Stick with Mark and
Luke person, there we go, we got that.
I'll do John.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get Matthew.
Hey, that sounds like a good deal. All right. All right, it's about 8:30 in the morning, Friday, April 7th, 30 AD. Back up into the fortress of Antonia. We'll start with Luke, chapter 23, 13 to 16.
Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was perverting the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any other charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Behold, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore chastise him and release him."
Okay, what does this tell you?
He was found innocent.
They couldn't find anything.
Innocent, couldn't find anything?
In our day,
Yes,
this is his one and only trial,
yes,
and he would be turned loose.
right. Otherwise you have double indemnity and you can't do that.
Right.
It's interesting, I find him not guilty, right? So what do you do with a not guilty person?
You flog him.
You beat him up.
Clearly.
Of course.
You punish him.
Okay. Their system was
For wasting my time.
something like that, or something. It baffles us in our current culture because we have a sense of justice because of this. Okay, so let's go on with their culture for a while. Antipas had returned Jesus to Pilate. "Thank you for allowing me to question Jesus," noted Antipas, "but I do not believe that Jesus has any political ambition." At the fortress of Antonia, Pilate met again with the religious leaders and a small crowd of people, the majority of which were supporters of the leaders and had been gathered by them. Right? Does that not sound familiar? Here we are again at the steps in front of the fortress. Question or thought? Mark 15, 6 through 10.
Now at the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up.
Okay, what happened?
Well, I see this as a political effort on the part of Pilate,
Mm-hmm.
because he chose the most notorious person he could and said, "Who should I release? This guy who I found nothing wrong with, or this guy who is a murderer?"
Pilate's not stupid.
Nope.
And he
Okay.
figured for sure they
Didn't keep their king.
Yeah.
Yeah. and not antagonize Rome by asking for an insurrectionist. Okay?
And that was really, I mean, from a political standpoint, it was smart, but it also kind of aligns with what Pilate had done before when he's saying, I find no guilt in this person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. As he was accustomed to do, to release for them any one prisoner, according to this translation. Okay? So, the choice would be theirs, the crowd, the leaders. Who makes the choice? Do they have a vote? Do they just go by acclamation? How do they make this choice? Who has the right to choose? It's kind of an odd situation. And you certainly would want to give them just any prisoner they want. Rome, I just don't think, would feel comfortable with that. You know, here's a person who led a revolt and killed 40 or 50 Romans. They're not going to let him go under any circumstance,
Although
I think.
It does say, anyone they ask for.
Yes, but I'm wondering why the writer put it that way. Okay, I don't suspect that the Romans would do that.
But then, of course, if it's basically a hand-picked crowd that's there, this time anyway,
Right.
then of course they're going to...
Well, and he's offering to release anyone they ask for, this guy or this guy.
Right, yeah.
That's not a...
That's only barely a choice.
Yeah, and
Right,
you know
thank
that
you.
probably in their policy of doing this, they probably release the lesser offenders most of the time.
I would think that makes sense, Now here it says that he committed murder during an insurrection, okay? So that's a significant crime, okay? Let's keep going then.
There's one thing that I'm just
Yes.
wondering. We know that Abba means
Daddy,
Papa or Daddy,
right.
and his is Bar-Abbas. So does the S make it different? Because if not, I find it very...
Son of Daddy?
Son of the Father?
No,
I know, but-
don't put it quite that way. That's got too much baggage with it. Daddy's boy, maybe.
But I just found that...
Yeah, I had
always
not,
found that an interesting...
I had not thought of that. That's a very good point. I've never heard of that.
Was this custom of letting the people decide, was that done commonly? I mean, it seems like that's kind of out of the ordinary.
I think we need to look at another gospel writer here. Let's go on, and then we'll come back here. Matthew 27, 15 to 18. Let's see what Matthew says.
Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. And so after they gathered, Pilate said to them, you said through 17?
Yes.
Yeah.
18.
So after they gathered, Pilate said to them, whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah? For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they handed him over.
Oh, that is some odd stuff there.
I had forgotten that his first name was
Jesus.
Yeshua also.
Yes, that's correct.
But we do know that was a common name at the time.
Oh, yeah, but it's still significant because of what we believe with Jesus.
Yeah, and it
Son
might also,
Joseph.
with that same last name, if that's kind of what it means, which, of course, I don't know for sure.
It could be, if it were not the name, it could be kind of a interesting way of putting it. Jesus, the Son of the Father. Okay, now, here in this translation, they use the word Christ. Now, of course, he was never called the Christ while he was here. Be aware of that. He was the potential Messiah, but never the Christ. So whenever you see that, the editors are putting it back in there for the Greek audience.
Yeah.
Okay? It is not a name, it's a title. Okay. So we have a notorious prisoner. Now it doesn't say what he did in this particular author. It simply says he's notorious. That means he's well known in a negative sense. Right?
Yeah.
Okay? And who is going to, see, the people gathered. So he's asking the people, it sounds like, who have been gathered and collected by the religious leaders. Okay? Whether Pilate knew that or not is not to say. It doesn't matter. He's going to release somebody, it sounds like. And that he's done it before.
Why did you think he had to release somebody?
Well, you're going to find out that in a question in a moment also, but another writer is going to have to answer that for you. It's going to make it worse. Sorry. Okay, let's go on then. Here we go, Luke 23:17. What do you have there?
But they all cried out together, "Away with this man."
No,
No, I'm gonna.
23:17. I hope I've got it right.
No, I don't have, I've got 16, "I will therefore chastise him and release him."
And the next one?
Is the one they said, but they all cried out together, but it's 18, I don't seem to have a 17.
Interesting. Someone, let's look this up. We're going to have to actually do this. Okay, Matthew, Mark, Luke 23. That's an interesting translation. It's like you don't ever stop at the 13th floor, right, in the old
Yeah,
days.
there's no verse 17.
What?
Well, here,
Mine
let's,
says now he was obliged to release to them at the feast one prisoner.
thank you.
That's in my Bible.
It's correct. See, the 17 is omitted by, is used as a footnote in the RSV, but it's omitted by certain ones. But it was there,
I have it in mine.
and that's exactly what it says. It says, now he was obliged to release one man to them at the festival.
Oh, I see.
So,
That was a custom.
One prisoner, that's what mine says.
your Bibles are different, oh no.
Oh, this is a concordance.
Okay, so let's calm down now.
There's verse 16, and there's verse 18.
See? It's being omitted by some. Well, that's all right. There's another story completely omitted too, is by some of these too. Let's go with what we have here. That's why it's in parentheses here, or brackets, okay? It says, according to Luke, that he was obligated to release to them a prisoner at the festival here, during the Passover. That's a little, that's interesting. Maybe it was some kind of arrangement that the Jews had come together with the Romans to, you give us a prisoner.
Strange.
I might have gone with a pickpocket if I had to give them something and I had no choice. I'd pick the easiest, gentlest thing I could find.
The guy who was smoking weed and started a garage band.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that would be the one. Too much noise in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I would not want to give them a leading insurrectionist that had killed people. It's just an odd situation. It's strange. To think that they are required to give, the Romans were required by the Jews to give them any prisoner of their choice. That makes no sense to me.
But it sounds like it's the choice between the two.
Well, but that's true. But it sounds, I can't see the Romans saying you can get whoever you want, whoever we've got happening here, you can get anyone you want. Mm-hmm. We'll give you two choices, but you can choose either one you want. I have problems with this.
It's very strange.
It's odd. Thank you. That they're obligated. Now I can understand they would do it, and it's a mercy thing, or something. But like with Jesus, it'd be a mercy thing. Let go a person who's innocent.
Or possibly release somebody who's really old that they don't want to take care of.
Right. I'm tired of keeping this guy in prison anymore. So I don't know. It's difficult.
Well, maybe it had been a custom long enough that, it's like kids, you do things a couple of years, and we always do this.
We've always done it that way.
You have to do it this way.
Right. And maybe it's an arrangement somehow. The Jewish leaders and the Romans came to? I just don't know. But I don't think they would be required to let loose whomever the crowds wanted. I think the Romans wouldn't put up with that. They'd probably go with whomever we chose to put on the block. Now we get into the crux of it. Pilate is going to test the people and the religious leaders. He's going to really go after them here. This is a political thing in his way, in my opinion. He's going to make them choose between a peaceful person and an enemy of Rome. So, I think it's Pilate doing this thing on purpose, making them choose between a murderer or a bandit or an insurrectionist and a speaker.
Well, it sounds like they've almost handpicked people, like she was saying.
Yep.
You know, that they were so jealous of Jesus or didn't want him to take over. I don't know. But,
Pilate is making the choice,
yeah.
giving them a choice of two.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion. Okay? All right, let's see what happens. John 18, 38b to 40.
And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release someone for you at the Passover. Do you wish then that I release for you the King of the Jews? Therefore they cried out again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
Thank you. Now all of a sudden he's just a robber. We don't know. It doesn't matter. He is a criminal in almost any court of law, okay, apparently. And it was a custom that the Jews had that the Romans were respecting. But they were going to choose, I'm sure, who is released. So Barabbas is an enigma. He's either a murdering insurrectionist or a robber or something. We don't know. Okay? The question is going to be, who are the people going to choose? This is what Pilate is after. My opinion, anyway.
This doesn't show that he said either one. This just says pick somebody.
Yeah.
This doesn't.
There you go. Good point.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we don't want this one. We'll take Barabbas. We know he's in there. You got him. We'll take him.
But in that other one, he told them to go.
Got them both right standing there.
Yeah.
Good. Excellent.
So with this whole thing, though, you can almost bet that the people who are going to get their way are the ones that are the loudest.
Oh, is the squeaky wheel, that doesn't matter? Yeah. It's the whoever got together the people who can yell.
Mm-hmm.
And who was doing that? Religious leaders.
Yep.
They got this crowd together. You don't want the followers of the guy who's been arrested here to be gathering a crowd. They might arrest them too. So, this is going to be a kangaroo court.
Mm-hmm.
To use the phrase, which I don't understand about kangaroos.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with Australia, I think, but I don't know. Okay, but this is foregone conclusion to go the way of the religious leaders. They are the ones Jesus is testing. Pilate is testing the people, the religious leaders and such as well, but Jesus is testing the religious leaders specifically, or to say specifically, God is testing them.
Well, and we also know that these religious leaders were probably not held in very high esteem by the Romans. In fact, in AD 70, they do something about it.
Yes, they do.
But so at this point in time, they're probably the Jews or the Jewish leadership are something that the Romans have to put up with.
And they are putting up with them.
An irritant.
Yes. And remember, it's not all of the religious leaders. It's a faction of them that want to deal with this Jesus issue.
Yeah. But they're the ones that are there.
They're the ones that are there. They're the ones that allowed us.
Probably the majority.
Could be, probably.
You know about Nicodemus and all.
Or they're the
that.
representatives of the majority to make sure that this guy is put out of the way. Anyway, it's a little challenging. Any other thoughts, questions? Pilate had given the matter some thought. One question kept coming to mind, in my opinion. Why are the religious leaders so afraid of Jesus? Then Pilate devised a test. Do they fear Jesus more than they fear the Romans? You understand that now? Does that bring up any question to you? Pilate would give the leaders a choice. Pilate would set one prisoner free. Would they choose Barabbas, a known terrorist or freedom fighter from the people's perspective, and thereby antagonize Rome and betray their own God? Or would they choose Jesus of Nazareth, a religious teacher, and have peace with Rome and show loyalty to their God? What would they do? This is Pilate testing them.
Or God through Pilate.
Yes, however, yes, the spirit, if you will.
Chances are their answer surprised Pilate, though. I would think.
I would think that they would not, he would have expected them to go with the teacher.
He had the dice loaded in his favor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so he gave them a real good test here. Insurrectionist or a peaceful teacher? What do you want? How much do they fear Jesus? More than they fear Romans' response.
Well, so
Go ahead.
sometimes when something irritates me, the more I work at trying to resolve it, the more personal it becomes,
Good point.
whether that makes sense or not.
Oh, it does.
I mean, even you know, cutting a piece of wood to make it fit, right? I mean, yeah, it gets personal after a while, and you've got to conquer this thing.
Every time I cut it, it still seems to get no longer. It gets a little shorter. Yes, it does. It's because you're putting yourself into it. And they have been arguing and fighting over this Jesus for some time. And yeah, I think by now it's very personal. And I don't think they want to have anything get in their way. I agree with you. Makes sense. So Pilate's having a fun time. I don't say fun, I shouldn't say it. But he is certainly pushing them. What would we choose? Okay. Pilate took Jesus and Barabbas out to face the leaders and the crowd and said to them, Jesus offers you peace, Barabbas offers you war. Which shall I set free? Oh, nicely done. Do they want to antagonize Rome or this theoretical God? It's going to be tough. I like Pilate in the sense he's really pushing him. Any questions, thoughts, or comments? To the religious leaders, the choice was simple. Jesus must die. Barabbas could never win the hearts of the people and lead the nation against Rome. Jesus could win many, but must ultimately fail. And all the power of Rome would fall on Israel, and they would lose their religious freedoms. Jesus was the greater threat. Do you see that?
Well, this is only one in a whole series of problems that the Jews had with surrounding nations.
Yes.
And I mean, they'd been in exile, they'd had all kinds of issues, and it was always their faith that seemed to be at the heart of the problem. And this will continue after Rome as well.
Yes, it will.
But
To this day.
yeah, but in my mind's eye, the religious leaders would have to be very careful and very aggressive to try to protect their belief system.
Belief system, good. I agree with you. I don't want to say power. It's not the power they're defending. They're defending God.
Yes.
As revealed through Moses and interpreted over the 2,000 years since then. Okay?
And interpreted by their own human expectations.
Also. But usually that's like when the Roman Church, after 1,500 years, had a certain way things were to be understood. And that was the only way there was. And they did that because they believed it. Mm-hmm. Not because they were being nasty about it. So I don't hold them responsible in that sense, and I don't think Jesus did either. They had been taught this way. He came to ask them to change their way and to become what God called them to be, a light to the world. They couldn't. They were stuck in their way.
And just to look ahead a little bit,
Okay.
as he was on the cross, he says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do.
Yeah. He didn't hold it against them. And we shouldn't either. Okay, anything else? Thought, comment, question? Jesus is the greatest threat because he threatens the core of who they think they are. They're the people of God, doing as he commanded them. He's the greater threat. And he'll convince enough of them that it'll cause a revolt, the Romans will come in, etc. It's much greater than some foolish little insurrectionist going, kill, kill. They can't win the hearts, people. Okay, here we go. Matthew 27:19.
While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him."
What does this show you?
Well, in hindsight, we can say it shows us what's right.
Okay. Let's look at the situation itself. What does it tell you about the situation that Pilate's in?
Well, it sounds like his wife agrees with him.
That he's innocent, okay.
That
Or he's declared it,
yeah. And because she called him righteous.
Mm-hmm.
But if she suffered in a dream or had a vision of some sort,
Yes.
that tells you that would have had to have come from God as well.
Thank you. So the Spirit was working on Pilate's wife. And by the way, the use of the word righteous, that's the author. Okay?
Yeah.
That's Matthew. But that she would be sensitive to the Spirit declaring that Jesus is innocent. And she I don't know what her suffering was. Conscience, looking into the future, I don't know. But she was not comfortable with that enough that she actually sent a message to her husband as he's sitting on the judgment seat.
We also know in those days that a female would not have had any authority.
Correct.
And so for her to tell her husband something like this is probably quite unusual.
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, women were not held in positions of authority. Let's see what it was at this time that Pilate received a message from his wife. She had a dream which had convinced her that Jesus was innocent and that Pilate needed to get out of the situation. Now, she didn't come herself personally, despite this picture. Okay, she would have.
How did he get the message?
Sent a servant.
Should have served a slave, someone to tell him. That would be simple. This is just the only thing I could find on the internet that was reasonable. Okay, so she has been convinced She hasn't even been there for the arguments. She hasn't been there for anything. She's convinced that the Spirit is telling her that Jesus is innocent. And Pilate gets to hear that from his wife. That's another thing. Okay, anything else? Mark 15:11.
Just that one?
Yep.
Okay. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him released for them. Barabbas instead.
Correct. As simple as that. That despite he's sitting there, he gets a message from his wife, and the crowd is being stirred up by the chief priests, asking for Barabbas. Okay, that's all. It's simple. No.
So I take a look at this, and I think what this would look like. And so now you've got a crowd here, and we don't know how big the crowd was in front of Pilate.
Yep.
But Pilate made an offer, him or him.
Yep.
I can see the chief priest going through the crowd and saying, pick Barabbas, pick Barabbas, pick Barabbas.
Right.
Make sure you get it right.
Yes, we're watching you vote. No. Okay. I'm sure there was more, the chief priests in the plural. They were in the crowds, obviously, and they were inciting them to call for Barabbas. Okay? Matthew 27:20 and 21.
Okay. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, which of the two do you want me to release to you? And they said, Barabbas.
Okay? What does this tell you? What's different here?
Well, here it tells you flat out that the chief priests and the elders went through the crowd and made sure they directed them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the governor would have seen that. He knew who was doing what.
Exactly. Yeah. Remember, he's testing them. He's pushing them. He's going to keep pushing, by the way. So he said, well, which of the two? And, of course, the loud ones went off with, we want Barabbas. We'll take a chance on Rome being unhappy. We've got to follow the chief priests and do what they say. And they think that the best thing to do is to get rid of Jesus. Question, thought, or comment?
Well, just if there probably had been more time for the trial and it were well known, the organization of the crowd might have been different.
It might well have been. But it's early morning, and some people want to sleep late.
Yep.
These were collected by the chief priests and their representatives. Woken up. Come on, let's go. Okay, here we go. Luke 23:18 and 19. Let's see what he adds.
But they all cried out together, away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder.
Okay. Anything different here? Oh, yes, there is.
Well, so it points out specifically that he was in prison for murder.
Yes, that's right. So we've got that one. And there was an insurrection within the city area. Okay, that's good. But I like this phrase where it says, they cried out all together. All. Okay, I usually have difficulty when they say all. Okay, that means there was not one person in the crowd who supported Jesus. And
That's what it sounds like, a select group.
yeah, a very select group.
Yeah.
So either there were a few of them and they simply got yelled out totally, or there were none. Don't know.
Or if there were some, they were afraid to speak up.
Correct. Very good. So this is a preordained. No, I know that's not correct. This is a obvious judgment from the people. This was going to happen, and Jesus knew this was going to happen.
I hope there was some, though, that thought it was wrong.
I would hope so too. There were even among the chief priests and elders, there were people who didn't believe, in the Sanhedrin, who didn't believe this was a good idea. Okay?
know.
I don't know.
Conscience at all.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
It is.
Okay? But they're being tested and tempted, and here we go. The leaders had no choice left. They stir up the crowd to demand that Barabbas be freed. Then they could blame the choice on the people. It's not the chief priests anymore that are at fault. It's the people. This is what they wanted. How typical in politics. You get a thing to work your way by working behind the scene, and you say, well, it wasn't my fault. Ha, ha, ha. It never happened since then. Ever.
Did you make a noise?
And certainly couldn't happen today. Nice noise, by the way. I do like that one. Yes, okay. Mark 15, 12 to 13. Matthew 27 does the same thing. So let's go with Mark 15, 12 to 13.
And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." Can I go on?
Yes, please.
And Pilate said to them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him."
What does it tell you?
It was a set-up job.
Well, yeah, they had a plan before they arrived.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think also Pilate is just flabbergasted. Why?
Why would you do this? This makes no sense, people. I agree. I don't think he expected that choice, as you clearly stated. It doesn't make sense. And he's trying to get out of it, too, in his own way. Remember his wife's message. He can't. They're not going to let him get out. But what's interesting is they ask him to be crucified.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a Jewish way of killing. The Jewish punishment is stoning. Okay, for religious things.
Well, we do know crucifixion was more cruel and it took a lot longer.
Yes, it could take 3-4 days sometimes. Okay, depending on the person. Okay. Now all of a sudden it sounds almost like revenge. The people, someone told them to ask for crucifixion. That's interesting, but crucifixion for a religious leader? That makes no sense. Pilate is flabbergasted.
But the Romans didn't execute by stoning.
No, not at all. They'd behead you or even stab you, even crucify, but that's meant for insurrectionists themselves, like
Now,
Barabbas.
the crucifixion was a visual that
Yeah.
people would have to see that body hanging on the.
Correct. Show them as an example of what happens when people oppose Rome at this high level.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
And that doesn't really apply to the Jesus situation.
not at all. And here are the people, encouraged by the religious leaders. No, I don't even think that. I don't think the religious leaders, well, here we go on, here we go. Let's finish this. Luke 23, 20 to 23.
Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus. But they shouted out, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why, what evil has he done? I have..."
Turn the page, right. Thin paper.
Okay, what has he done? "I have found in him no crime deserving death. I will therefore chastise him and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed.
Okay. All right, so Luke has added what? What have you seen here?
Well, clearly you have a stirred up crowd.
You have a stirred up crowd.
And they certainly weren't listening to Pilate.
And I wonder if the religious leaders wanted him crucified. It seems to me that they wanted him condemned and given back to them so they could stone him. Do it their way. But someone in the crowd got all excited maybe and asked for crucifixion. The choice had been made. Now Pilate needed to decide what to do with Jesus. What threat did the religious leaders perceive such that they're willing to betray one of their own and antagonize the Romans? There are a lot of Jewish people that are not going to be happy with them turning Jesus, a Jew, over to the Romans. You know, if a Roman attacks or grabs the person and puts them on trial, that's one thing. But to actually turn over one of your own to the hated Romans?
Well, this way you could blame the Romans for killing him.
That's the idea. It's true. And that's, yeah, but they don't want to do that. I don't think the religious leaders wanted him crucified. I think they wanted him back. Just condemned. And let it be at that. And Pilate is pushing them. Pilate wanted to set Jesus free, get this, in order to antagonize the religious leaders that had already damaged their credibility with their own people. Remember, I think Pilate is smart. If Jesus would have provided Pilate with some excuse. Question or thought?
Well, I didn't really get the sense that he was doing that to antagonize them, but that he truly didn't find any problem with what Jesus had been doing.
Good point.
But, you know, maybe by that, I don't know.
By that time, it's personal for Pilate as well, maybe.
Yeah, who knows?
I don't know. I think he's going after the religious leaders. I think he's starting to push them even harder. That's why I say antagonize them. Okay? Never know. I don't really know. Okay. Anything else? Here we go. John 19:1.
Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him.
Okay. I'm going to let him go, but before I do, I'm going to beat him up so that you're happy that at least I did that.
Is that what scourge mean? That word, I didn't really know that word.
Yeah, scourged is a specific title, meaning you're going to rip up their skin and kind of punish them really bad. The idea is to convince them never to do what they were accused of but were not found guilty of. Scourged. It's a specific form of punishment.
I figured that.
Yeah. Let's look at it then. Mark 15, 16 to 20.
Okay. So I didn't read 15 before, but that's okay.
That's all right. It's coming later.
All right. And the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole battalion, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. And they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him.
Okay.
They led him up to crucify him.
Not that. That right here. This is
That was
good.
in 20.
Sorry. Okay. So, I'm going to let him go, and I'm turning him over to how many Romans? An entire cohort.
What is this battalion?
Battalion. Okay. 80 guys. They're all there. Now, we've seen this scene before in our pictures and stuff. Okay? Anything unusual or something that you want to notice?
Well, just that they were mocking him, you know, insulting,
Oh, yeah.
and they were probably, you know, that's probably standard procedure.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, you know, and if they hadn't been around during the trial, then they wouldn't have had a clue that Pilate actually thought he was innocent. All they know is this now is a condemned prisoner, and they were
Correct.
just treating him like junk,
Correct.
like
Okay.
they would probably anybody else, especially
Exactly.
since he's supposed to be the king of the Jews, you know,
Yes.
and they're just really being nasty about
They
it.
would have heard the charge that was being presented, say this is what he's being brought up on trial for. He's going to be released, tear him up. Make sure he doesn't think of himself in that way.
Well, at this point, he's been sent to be crucified.
No. He's sent to be scourged. You've not sent, I purposely stopped there.
Oh.
Okay? He is not being sent to be crucified. He's sent to be punished and set free. Okay? But they get to play with him. Play. Okay? They get to abuse him.
Well, okay, but in
Go ahead.
verse 15, which you didn't have me.
Which we're going to come to later. It's out of position. We'll come back to that. Hang in there.
Okay,
Okay,
it just sounds.
stay with me.
But we,
Timing sounds different.
I have 4 writers, and I've got to put them all together.
yeah, I was gonna say, there's something more that comes before that.
There is much more that's
Yeah.
happening. So let's just take it as it is right now, okay? They're sending him out to punish him, okay? Why? To then, if we punish him enough, maybe the crowds will say, well, that's enough. You beat the heck out of him, that's enough. That's part of why they do it that way. Paul would be beat up before he was even brought to trial. They'd beat him with rods to kind of soften up and say, it's going to get worse if you don't tell us the truth. That's the Roman way. That's not unusual. It's not the way it's supposed to happen in our justice system, but that's the way it was then. Matthew 27 through 31a.
Sorry, I got
No
a camera a little. Okay, Matthew, starting at 27.
Correct.
Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head.
Thank you. That's where you stop. Sounds familiar. It's the same basic story, right?
Mhm.
Okay. But they did mention that they put the reed in his right hand. Okay? The hand of authority, the hand of power, despite left-handers today. That was the way it was at the time.
Like a scepter.
Like the scepter would always be in the right hand. Okay? I don't want to say anything more about it, but that's the same basic thing that was just discussed, correct? Here we go then. John 19, 2 through 4.
And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in a purple robe. And they began to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews," and to give him blows in the face. And Pilate came out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him."
Thank you. So you see, he's not being sent to crucify. He's not been declared to be crucified. He's only being punished. Okay? That's hard to see depending on how you're reading the 4 stories, the 4 writers. Okay?
But they are going to bring him out looking like a real mess.
Well, they are going to do that.
Yeah.
It's his plan, and I'm going to mention that, but it's part of it has to be here at the moment. So he's being beat up, punished for the crowd's pacification.
And the crowd doesn't seem to be,
Well,
not.
we don't know their response yet. Not yet. So here, let's go on. Okay? Jesus would be treated just as hundreds of other leaders that opposed Roman rule had been treated. He is, the church nowadays talks about how terrible the punishment, how horrible. There was a movie about how terrible. It was no more terrible than any others. He did not suffer more than, in fact, he suffered less than many others. Okay? It's not the punishment that matters. Okay? We'll get to that in a minute. He was a rebel, and he would suffer. Okay? The guards took him into the courtyard where Jesus was stripped. He was tied to a post and whipped with a short whip with metal-tipped thongs, something like this. Ouch!
I can't even imagine
I
how much
can't.
that would
No.
hurt.
No.
Rips your,
The pain that would be.
It just rips the flesh off of you.
Well, that's the idea. And anyone who's, this would have happened to Barabbas if he had been taken out, finally, to be dealt with. In fact, it probably did eventually. But this is normal. This is standard operating procedure. Not any worse than any other rebel could have faced. Okay? And yes, it would tear up the skin and bleed all over the place. Okay, here we go. Until he was bloodied and weak. It would have drained the energy from him as well. The flesh hung in strips down his back, from his shoulders to his knees. But before he could pass out, they stopped. The guards were now free to play with this so-called king. Play means abuse. Okay? Needless to say, that soldiers nowadays would never do such a thing. From any country, right? Going to make these noises again, aren't we? They gave Jesus a crown like Caesar's wreath crown. Only this one had short thorns.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch. But by now, Jesus would have been in shock. So, what the heck? From twigs taken from the fireplace. The thorns were pressed into the head of Jesus. Most of the pictures have thorns 2 inches long. That's crazy. Okay? They gave Jesus a scarlet robe like Caesar's royal purple robe. There's a difference. Royal purple was only to be worn by rulers. Okay? A scarlet robe is to give you the idea of that. Okay?
You know, they probably wouldn't even have something in purple available.
No, not at all. Not a chance. Okay? It would have been something they had. Now, maybe this was the robe that Herod Antipas had sent him with. I don't know. Because Herod put a robe on him also, remember. But it doesn't matter. He's getting a robe to say, a king like Caesar. Okay? They even gave Jesus a symbol of authority, a scepter, a stick that was taken lying nearby, like Caesar's scepter. Then the guards pretended that Jesus was a king and bowed to him, and then hit Jesus with the scepter and spit on him. "Greetings, King of the Jews," they spat. This is what Jesus knew would happen to him, and he still did it, holding his faith in his Father. He could have gotten out of this at any time by calling down the angels, couldn't he? Okay? But he's going to follow through on this because he has faith in the Father. It's his faith that's important here, in my opinion. John 19, 5 through 7.
Jesus therefore came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When therefore the chief priests and the other officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by that law he ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God."
Okay. You notice anything here? What did Pilate tell them?
Well, yeah.
Crucify him yourself? No. The Jews can't crucify. He would have said, take him yourself and deal with him. That he could have said. But what would the Jews have done? They would have stoned him. Okay? Again, little pieces of this and that fit together, sort of. Okay? I find no guilt in him, so I'm not going to do it. And they said, well, he should be stoned at the least. Okay? What do you say? John 18 to 11. Let's continue now. 8 through 11.
When Pilate therefore
11.
heard this statement, he was the more afraid.
Stop. Whoa, stop. What statement did he hear? Right here. In verse 7.
He made himself out to be the Son of God.
He's the Son of God. We have a God here. Now go ahead.
And he entered into the
Praetorium.
again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "You do not speak to me. Do you not know that I have authority to release you, and I have authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me up to you has the greater sin."
Okay. Who is he talking about who delivered him up?
The Jewish authorities.
The Jewish religious leaders. That's
Yeah.
correct. They are the ones that have the greater sin, not Judas. Okay? So, authority. Go ahead.
So if Pilate were convinced that this guy did not deserve death,
Correct.
okay, he has already said, hey, it's not going to be up to me, I'm not going to do it.
Right?
And these guys, and so what we're reading in this scripture now is Jesus telling to Pilate, it's okay,
Yeah.
these guys have the greater sin, not you.
Yeah, it's okay. That's right. He knows. So, anything? Yes?
Well, the fact that it's suddenly come to his attention that Jesus is
Possible
making
God.
himself the Son of God.
Yeah.
You go, think of it from the Romans. I mean, they have all these stories of the gods coming,
Right.
Hermes or whoever, the various ones coming and interacting with people.
Yeah.
So that's something that
That made him nervous.
they would believe.
Yes.
Something like that.
Exactly. He had to now go back and find out, is this guy a Roman god? A god? And that's why I think he did. He brought him back and said, well, who are you? Where are you from? And Jesus wouldn't answer him. He could have gotten out of it right there.
But then to say that, you would have no authority over me unless it was given to you from above. Zeus even.
Yeah,
said
even
it's
Zeus.
okay.
Yes.
So,
Pilate's got a problem here.
yeah, that's
Okay.
really very heavy.
As they put Jesus on display in front of the people who were gathered outside, Isaiah, they said, behold the man who would be your king. Sadism was not uncommon under these circumstances, as was prophesied by Isaiah. Pilate brought Jesus before the leaders and those that they had gathered. But this time he was going to push the religious leaders. I find no crime against Rome that warrants death, Pilate said. So he's come back to him and he's saying, I still don't find it. Here we go. But the religious authorities stated clearly the ultimate crime, as far as they were concerned, Jesus was proclaiming himself to be the Son of God. That's the ultimate crime.
Yeah, none of this pussyfooting around.
No.
Oh, he's stirring up the people.
No, none of that. This is it. Okay? Upon hearing that Jesus might be a god, Pilate brought him back inside and questioned him on that point. But Pilate was just a tool, and Jesus had no intention of letting Pilate stand in the way of the choice the religious leaders had made. Who's in authority? Who is in charge here? Just as it was necessary that someone hand Jesus over to the religious leaders in order to force their decision, so it was necessary that someone carry out the death sentence. God's in charge. Question, thought, or comment? That's why Jesus didn't talk to them. John 19, 12 to 13.
And Pilate wrote an inscription also and put it on the cross. And it was written, Jesus the Nazarene.
No. John 19, 12 to 13.
Oh,
That's all right. We'll get there eventually.
As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, if you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew,
Gabbatha.
Gabbatha.
Okay, what happened?
Well, now they're making Pilate afraid for his job.
Bingo! They're threatening Pilate.
And probably his
His life,
livelihood.
guaranteed his life. Okay?
Yeah.
They are going down to, this is really getting to it. Okay? John 19, 14 and 15 now, please.
Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, Behold your king. They therefore cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priest answered, We have no king but Caesar.
Ah, there we go. That's it. The decision is absolutely final now. We have no king but Caesar. Not God.
Must have just,
Which,
you think God hearing those words,
Yes.
these are my people, and they've just rejected me.
Yep.
well, and so I can't imagine people, so the Jews hated the Romans.
Yes.
They were under the thumb of the Romans.
Yes.
And many of the Jews thought it was wrong to even use Roman money.
Yes.
Any of that.
Yep.
And now they're saying, oh, Caesar's our king?
Here we go.
Yeah.
I think Satan is in there probably whispering, say this.
Well,
because
but-
he's having a field day, he doesn't
Yeah.
know what's coming.
But clearly this whole thing was, it didn't align with their own views.
No, it didn't. It's out of control now.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. It got out of control. Okay? The religious leaders were ready with their final argument. He says that he is a king, they argued. What would Caesar do to you if you allowed a rival to Caesar to live? So now it's a personal attack. They're going right to the core. This is not where they wanted to go, but this is where they're going to go because they're now caught up in this. We have to win. Pilate felt fear. Caesar would have Pilate killed, or worse. The implied threat angered Pilate. You threaten my power, he thought, then I will threaten your power. Pilate decided to set the religious leaders against their people. Pilate asked, what should I do with your king? We have no king but Caesar, someone shouted in the heat of the moment. I'm sure it wasn't intended by the religious leaders that be said. To be sure that Pilate would condemn Jesus to death, though Israel claimed they had no king but God. This is just the passion of the moment, in my opinion. The religious leaders would not have said that. No king but Caesar. Somebody did.
But whoever shouted that
Yep.
shouted what they thought might work.
That's correct. They've got to get this guy killed, and that was it. I agree with you. When Pilate asked what he should do with Jesus, in a moment of religious passion, some there started shouting, crucify him. That was not what Caiaphas would have preferred. He would rather the Romans allow them to stone Jesus. But the majority got carried away, that's called trying to control the crowd, with religious fervor, and there would be no stopping them now. They were out of control. Now the people would know that their religious leaders had arranged for an innocent man to be killed by foreigners. Listen to that. Just as David had done when he had foreigners kill Uriah. That act of injustice had angered God then and would surely anger God now. Question or thought? Matthew 27, 24 through 25.
Okay. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood, see to it yourselves. Then the people as a whole answered, his blood be on us and on our children.
Okay. Now Pilate chose to twist the knife. He had a basin of water brought out and announced that he would allow Jesus to be crucified, but that he washed his hands of the responsibility for the spilling of innocent blood of Jesus, just as the elders of Israel had done in the past. As he was washing his hands, someone in the crowd yelled out that they would accept the responsibility for the death of Jesus. They were out of control. The crowd was out of control of the religious leaders as well.
And these words were actually a driving force behind all of the murders during the Crusades of the Jews.
That's right.
Christ killers.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right. Okay? Which was supported by the bureaucracy of the time.
Yes.
Luke 23, 24 through 25a.
But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate gave sentence that their demands should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder.
Okay, that's it. Stop for a moment. That's fine. So, he's going to let it happen. He's going to condemn Jesus and release Barabbas. Mark 15, 15a. Wishing to satisfy the crowd, Pilate releases Barabbas for them. That's all he did. That's all I'm after right here. Okay? And so Barabbas was released. A violent man that was working to force the Romans to leave Israel. A true enemy of Rome. Mark 15, 15b.
And having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified.
That's it. Luke 7, 23, 25b says the same thing, but he delivered Jesus to their will. John 19, 16. So he then handed him over to be crucified. Now see, he's not giving him back to the Jews to be stoned. He's going to hand him to the soldiers to crucify. Around 9 a.m., Pilate turned Jesus over to the soldiers to be executed finally. Mark 15, 20b reads, and they led him out to crucify him. Matthew 27, 31b. After they had mocked him, they took the scarlet robe off of him and put his own garments back on him and led him away to be crucified. Led him away to crucify him. They're mixing parts of this, okay? Then the guards took Jesus back inside, made him get dressed in his own clothes. He had had the scarlet robe on. And they left the crown on to remind everyone that Jesus is their king. And they prepared for the procession through Jerusalem to the place of execution. Now the Judean Jews could spend their time in preparation for the Judean Passover, which still hadn't happened yet, still that day, according to the Gospel of John. And so next time we get together, it'll be
Crucifixion.
the procession to the crucifixion.